Hello and welcome back. I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. We come to you with more updates on the G7 summit currently taking place in Kananaskis, Alberta in Canada. We have some more updates also to bring you on the ongoing tensions between Israel and Iran. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made a dramatic assertion saying that assassinating Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, would end the conflict, not escalate it. Let's have a listen to that comment.
It's not going to escalate the conflict, it's going to end the conflict. We've had half a century of conflict spread by this regime that terrorizes everyone in the Middle East, has bombed the Aramco oil fields in Saudi Arabia, is spreading terrorism and subversion and sabotage everywhere. That's the forever war is what Iran wants. And they're bringing us to the brink of nuclear war. In fact, what Israel is doing is preventing this, bringing an end to this aggression. And we can only do so by standing up to the forces of evil. Look, democracies have had to learn this lesson.
Well, this comes as the Israeli military claims to have struck an Iranian F-14 fighter jet at Tehran airport. Iran, meanwhile, told the United Nations that its military actions against Israel were proportionate and purely targeted at military infrastructure, invoking the right to self-defense under the UN Charter. As the Israel-Iran conflict escalates, the world's most powerful leaders have gathered in Canada for the G7 summit, now dominated by emerging Middle Eastern tensions. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney officially welcomed G7 leaders, including US President Donald Trump, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and French President Emmanuel Macron at a ceremony in the Canadian Rockies. Behind closed doors, substantive discussions have begun, with the Israel-Iran crisis taking centre stage. Well, joining us to discuss the impact that this ongoing conflict will have on the ongoing G7 summit, as the world's most powerful leaders, most of them in Alberta, discuss what comes next. Megha Sharma, thank you ever so much for joining us, Senior Executive Editor at NewsX World. We've had reports coming through all evening, Megha, talking about escalations in the ongoing conflict, a key talking point, but US involvement and US alliance with Israel is potentially derailing a joint statement. What can you tell us?
Yes, talking about the G7 Leaders Summit that is taking place and the bilaterals that have happened on the sidelines, there have been strong statements that have been coming from the United States head of state. The US is not keen on signing the joint communique, the joint statement that at this point of time at its draft stage, where the G7 nations, excluding United States, have in their statement said that they desire immediate de-escalation from both Israel and Iran side. And the second point that has been mentioned in the draft statement says that the G7 nations unitedly condemn the nuclear program of Iran. So Trump is basically reluctant to sign this statement. Meanwhile, there's more information coming in that the British, French and the German heads of states are going to be speaking to Iran officials, the Iran president, in the course of the day today, and this is a phone call that is going to be made by these three leaders to Iran. Meanwhile, Iran has once again urged US President Donald Trump to make a phone call to the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and tell him to ensure that there is ceasefire that takes place. In fact, the Iranian president went out to say that a single phone call from President Trump is going to stop Israel from further attacking Iran. But Israel doesn't seem to be, in a position, in a state of mind to negotiate a ceasefire, because its leaders are coming out and making statements such as these, that the killing of the supreme leader of Iran is going to ensure that the war comes to an end. In fact, the Israeli military has even gone on to say that its military operation against Iran is still not over, and they will continue to do so. There have been a number of incidents just a few minutes ago where a number of military aircraft from Israel as well as from Iran have been struck down by the military forces on either side. So in wake of all these developments that are taking place in the Middle East, as well as the appeals that are going from Iran to United States of America, it is interesting to see what happens in the joint communique that is released, the joint statement that is released by the G7 nations, that is going to be released, that is going to be put out in public domain tomorrow, and whether Trump can really be persuaded in the next few hours that the G7 nations, heads of states, have to speak with him, to discuss with him and deliberate on this grave issue that is only becoming worse as the days pass by.
Yes, absolutely. And Mega, Iran have told the UN that any cooperation by third parties, and I quote, makes them complicit in the legal responsibility and consequences of the crisis. There have been reports that the US have assisted Israel in repelling Iranian strikes. That message a warning? Will that have any impact on the discussions that the G7 leaders will be having on the crisis?
Yeah, isn't it just so obvious that this narrative that is built by the West, the G7 nations, NATO, even United Nations, the IAEA, they all seem to be on the same page in their unilateral approach of condemning Iran and stopping it from building its nuclear arsenal. Meanwhile, they have not really raised the issue of the humanitarian crisis that has been triggered because of the Israeli strikes. Like I said previously as well, there are more than 240 people that have died in the strikes that hit Iran, not just on its nuclear facilities and military infrastructure, but also residential areas, killing scores of innocent civilians. So again, a lopsided view that is being propagated in terms of the global narrative, and led by the G7. Now here, when Trump goes on and says that Iran and Israel need to have a deal in place, he goes on to say that, we had 60 days, I had given Iran 60 days to come to the negotiating table and seal the deal. There were these bilateral talks that were happening. There were these negotiations that were happening. The last one that was supposed to happen on Sunday in Oman obviously ended up as a no-show in view of the strikes that were initiated by Israel on Iranian infrastructure. And there have been a number of talks that have happened in the last 60 days, as Trump mentioned this. And then this is what he has spoken as a justification for Israel to hit Iran, because Iran refused to come to a conclusion, come to a negotiation on its nuclear program. But then of course this is going to cause a major upheaval, a reset in terms of the top leadership in Iran. This is going to obviously bring about a reset in the Middle Eastern relations, whether it is Saudi Arabia or, for that matter, Turkey, which has also been raising its voice in wanting to negotiate a deal between Iran and Israel, which doesn't seem to be likely in wake of these conflicting remarks coming in, and particularly the threats that continue to be issued from Israeli leadership wanting to decimate the Iranian leadership, the supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei.
Yes, Mega Sharma, thank you very much joining us